Bismillah walhamdulillah wasalat wasalam ala Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him. My beloved brothers and sisters, when we speak about success, most people immediately think of material possessions, achievements, or recognition from others. But in Islam, success is not defined by the size of your bank account or the number of titles attached to your name. It begins from a much deeper place, the way you think, the way you perceive the world, and the way you allow your mind to process your reality. The Prophet told us in a hadith that actions are but by intentions, and every man shall have only that which he intended. This is not just a legal principle, it is a profound psychological truth. The root of everything you do begins with a thought, and that thought, when nurtured, becomes an intention. Once it is intended, it translates into action. Over time, your repeated actions form habits, and your habits define your character. Eventually, your character is what determines your destiny, so if you want to control your destiny, you must begin by controlling your thoughts. Think about it for a moment. Every invention, every act of kindness, every sin, every achievement, where did it all begin? With a thought. Some thoughts are fleeting and harmless, but others settle in the heart. They take root, and they shape the very direction of your life. If a person fills their mind with constant negativity, doubt, and suspicion, how do you expect them to live a life of confidence, trust, and faith? And if someone nurtures thoughts of gratitude, positivity, and remembrance of Allah, they create an inner state that empowers them to face life's challenges with strength. The Qur'an constantly calls on us to reflect, to ponder, to think. Do they not reflect upon themselves? Allah asks in Surah Al-Rum, that is a divine invitation to self-awareness. Controlling your mind is not about suppressing every thought, it is about cultivating the right ones. It's about filtering the whispers of Shaytan from the inspirations that bring you closer to Allah, and the truth is, the mind is like fertile soil. Whatever you plant inside, it will grow. If you plant weeds of envy, hatred, and greed, they will choke your peace and happiness. But if you plant seeds of faith, patience, and hope, your life will flourish with strength and serenity. We often underestimate how powerful our inner dialogue is. If your mind is constantly telling you that you are not good enough, that you will fail, that you are too weak to change, eventually you will believe it, and that belief will paralyze you. But if you train your mind to remember that Allah is with you, that His mercy is greater than your mistakes, that His plan is better than your own, suddenly your perspective changes. You begin to live with courage instead of fear, with calm instead of anxiety. That is the power of the mind when it is disciplined by faith. Even in psychology today, experts talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, the idea that your thoughts directly affect your emotions and your behavior. Yet long before modern science discovered this, Islam had already laid down the principle that the way you think determines the way you live. Your heart and mind are linked, and the Prophet emphasized this when he said, "In the body there is a piece of flesh. If it is sound, the whole body is sound. If it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. Truly it is the heart. And what feeds the heart? The stream of thoughts that pass through your mind every single day. So if you want to change your life, if you want to achieve true success, you cannot ignore what is happening inside your head. The battle for success is not fought in boardrooms or classrooms or marketplaces. It is fought in the quiet space of your own mind. If you win that battle, everything else follows. The question I leave you with is simple but profound. What kind of thoughts are you nurturing today, and are they leading you toward Allah or away from Him? If we move a step deeper, beyond the level of thoughts, we come to the heart itself. In Islam, the heart is not just a physical organ, it is the seat of your spiritual life. The Qur'an reminds us in very clear terms, the day when neither wealth nor children will benefit anyone, except the one who comes to Allah with a sound heart. Think about that. On the day of judgment, the things that people spend their entire lives chasing, money, status, property, even family ties, none of that will matter if the heart is diseased. What will matter is whether your heart was purified, sincere, and connected to Allah. But how do we reach that purified heart? It begins with controlling the flow of thoughts that enter and settle there. Just as clean water can become contaminated if impurities are poured into it, Your heart becomes corrupted if you allow negative and sinful thoughts to flow unchecked. The whispers of Shaytan often begin very subtly, with doubts, with suggestions, with distractions. If they are entertained, they seep into the heart and begin to harden it. That's why scholars often say the mind is the gateway to the heart. Whatever occupies your mind eventually imprints itself upon your heart. There is a psychological reality here as well. The more you think about something, the more emotional weight it carries. Constant exposure to envy, anger, or greed in your thoughts creates a state of unrest within your heart. On the other hand, nurturing thoughts of gratitude, humility, and trust in Allah softens the heart, making it receptive to guidance. This is why the Quran consistently urges believers to engage in Dhikr, the remembrance of Allah. Every time you remember Allah, you are not just uttering words, you are shaping the atmosphere of your heart. You are creating an environment where serenity can grow and where harmful thoughts cannot easily take root. Many people today complain of feeling spiritually numb. They pray, they fast, they perform acts of worship, but they say, "My heart doesn't feel it." The question we must ask is, what is being allowed to circulate in the mind during the day? If your mind is constantly consumed by scrolling through negativity, comparing yourself to others, chasing worldly illusions, or replaying grudges and hurts, then your heart is being fed poison. Worship cannot fully penetrate when the heart is already clogged with these toxins. That is why purification of the heart begins with vigilance over thoughts. And this is not only a spiritual teaching, it is also deeply practical. Imagine someone who allows resentment to dominate their mind. Soon, that resentment settles in their heart. Now, every time they interact with the person they resent, they cannot see clearly, they cannot act justly, because their perception has been distorted. In contrast, someone who trains their mind to forgive, to overlook, to focus on what Allah has promised for patience, will find their heart becoming lighter. That lightness allows them to live with more peace and to direct their energy toward growth instead of bitterness. The Prophet warned us about envy and hatred, saying they shave away good deeds just as a razor shaves hair. Why? Because these diseases settle in the heart, but they begin as thoughts. If you catch them at the level of the mind, you can prevent them from becoming rooted in the heart. That is true mental and spiritual discipline. So the question is, what are you allowing into your heart through your thoughts? Every moment of reflection, every conversation, every memory you entertain, it all leaves an imprint. The heart you take to Allah on the Day of Judgment is the sum of what you allow to settle inside it. Control your thoughts and you purify your heart. Purify your heart and you secure your path to Allah. That is the real success. One of the greatest challenges we face in mastering the mind is dealing with the inner voice that constantly speaks to us. Sometimes it is encouraging, reminding us to do good, to remain hopeful, to trust Allah. But very often it can become our worst enemy, pulling us down with self-doubt, fear, and negativity. This is what we call negative self-talk, and it is one of the most powerful tools Shaytan uses against us. He does not always need to confront us openly. He simply plants a whisper, a suggestion, a doubt. If we are not vigilant, that whisper grows louder until it feels like our own voice. Think about how many times you've heard that voice in your mind saying, "You're not good enough," or "It's too late for you," or "Everyone else is better than you." Shaytan doesn't need to physically harm you if he can convince you to harm yourself through your own thoughts. His strategy is not just to push you towards sin, but to paralyze you from doing good. How many times have people delayed repentance because the voice in their head told them, "You've sinned too much, Allah won't forgive you." Yet Allah himself tells us repeatedly in the Quran that his mercy encompasses all things. Shaytan lies, but if you believe the lie, it becomes your reality. From a psychological perspective, this is extremely important. Human beings have a tendency to internalize repeated messages. If you keep telling yourself you are worthless, your mind begins to filter out evidence to the contrary. Even blessings appear insignificant, and every setback feels like proof of your inadequacy. In other words, negative self-talk becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is why controlling it is not optional. It is essential for your spiritual and emotional survival. Islam teaches us a powerful way to combat this. It is not by ignoring the inner voice, but by replacing it with better words, words of dhikr, of dar, of affirmations grounded in faith. When you wake up in the morning and say Alhamdulillah, you are not just uttering a ritual phrase. You are programming your mind to see gratitude instead of deficiency. When you remind yourself, Hasbun Allah, hu wa ni'mal wakil, Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs, you are replacing fear with trust. And when you remember that the Prophet said, the strong believer is more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, while there is good in both, you begin to see strength not in arrogance, but in resilience and reliance on Allah. Negative self-talk also thrives in comparison. You see someone else's wealth, their success, their family, and you immediately think less of yourself. But the Qur'an teaches us to look at those above us in matters of faith and character, and those below us in matters of dunya. Why? Because comparison is a trap. If you keep comparing yourself to someone's worldly possessions, your mind will always find you lacking. But if you compare yourself to someone struggling with less, your heart will fill with gratitude. This is not just a spiritual exercise. It is a psychological strategy to protect your mind from destructive cycles of negativity. The Prophet also gave us a beautiful principle when he said, do not belittle any good deed. Why? Because that belittling begins in the mind. If Shaytan convinces you that your small acts of kindness, your small steps toward improvement, your small efforts in worship don't matter, you'll stop altogether. But if you realize that Allah treasures even the smallest sincere act, suddenly your mind begins to see value in progress, not perfection. So the next time that inner voice tells you that you can't, that you're too far gone, or that you don't matter, recognize it for what it is. A whisper, not a truth. Replace it with the words of Allah and His Messenger, and watch how your mindset shifts. You cannot silence the whispers forever, but you can control whether you believe them or not. And sometimes the greatest victory over Shaytan is simply to say, I hear you, but I don't accept you, because my Lord has already promised me better. When we talk about controlling the mind, we cannot overlook the role of discipline. The human mind is naturally restless. It wanders, it fluctuates, it gets distracted. Left unchecked, it will chase after desires, anxieties, and impulses without direction. But Islam does not simply tell us to control the mind. In the abstract, it gives us a system, a structure, a training program to discipline ourselves. That is what worship truly is. Think of Salah, for example. 5 times a day, regardless of where you are, you stop everything and stand before Allah. From a worldly perspective, that might look repetitive or even restrictive, but in reality it is training. Each time you stand in prayer, you are practicing focus. You silence distractions, you turn away from everything else, and you condition your mind to concentrate on the one who controls everything. Psychologists today call this mindfulness, the ability to be fully present. Islam had already given us Salah as the highest form of mindfulness, connecting presence of mind with presence of heart before the Creator. Then there is fasting. People often think fasting is only about staying hungry. But what happens when you fast? You train your mind to say no to urges, even the most basic ones. Hunger, thirst, physical desire, these are powerful impulses. But for the sake of Allah, you discipline yourself to resist them. That practice is not about a few hours of abstinence. It is about strengthening your willpower so that when you are confronted with other temptations, whether it's dishonesty, anger, or indulgence, you already have the mental discipline to resist. Modern research even shows that self-control operates like a muscle. The more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. Allah has already given us Ramadan every year as a spiritual gym for that muscle. And look at Qur'an recitation. It is not just about reading words. It is about training the mind to focus, to absorb, to reflect. The Qur'an itself says, do they not then reflect upon the Qur'an, or are there locks upon their hearts? Reflection requires slowing down, paying attention, engaging deeply. In a world of endless scrolling and distractions, the Qur'an pulls us back to a state of stillness where the mind can connect with truth. You see, discipline in worship is not separate from discipline in daily life. The person who learns to wake up for Fajr even when it is difficult builds the same discipline needed to wake up early for work, for study, or for serving others. The one who learns patience in fasting acquires patience in dealing with people, in enduring hardship, in pursuing long-term goals. Worship is not a ritual checklist. It is a comprehensive training program for the mind and heart. But here's where many of us go wrong. We separate religious life from real life. We think Salah is just in the masjid, fasting is just in Ramadan, Qur'an is just for recitation competitions. Yet these are tools Allah has given us to carry discipline into every sphere of life. A person who prays but still cannot control their anger, or who fasts but still falls into dishonesty, has missed the deeper purpose. Allah says clearly about fasting, "O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may attain taqwa." Taqwa means self-control, awareness of Allah, discipline of the mind and heart. So, if you want to control your mind, don't look for abstract theories. Start with worship. Align your daily practices with the divine system. When the prayer teaches you focus, apply that focus to your studies, your work, your relationships. When fasting teaches you patience, apply that patience to your goals, to your struggles, to your character. When Qur'an recitation teaches you reflection, apply that reflection to your choices, your habits, and your direction in life. The truth is, you cannot discipline your mind with willpower alone. Left on its own, the mind is weak, fragile, easily deceived. But when trained through worship, it becomes steady, resilient, and strong. And that strength is what carries you through the challenges of this world and towards success in the next. So ask yourself, are you using your worship to discipline your mind, or are you just going through the motion? Because worship without discipline is a body without a soul. But worship with discipline transforms not only your mind, but your entire life. One of the greatest struggles of the human mind today is distraction. We live in an age of constant noise, notifications, advertisements, endless scrolling, and comparison. The dunya has never been more aggressive in capturing our attention. And if you don't learn to control your focus, the world will control it for you. Islam teaches us that real success requires clarity of purpose. You cannot chase everything at once. You cannot fill your mind with worldly distractions and still expect to have space for Allah. The Qur'an reminds us, know that the life of this world is but amusement and diversion and adornment and boasting among you and competition in wealth and children. 57:20. This verse is not condemning wealth or children. It is exposing the illusion. If your mind becomes consumed by these distractions, you will always feel restless, always chasing, never arriving. The dunya is designed to pull you into endless comparisons. Who has more money? Who has more recognition? Who has a better lifestyle? And yet none of these pursuits can give lasting peace. The mind that constantly seeks validation from the dunya will never taste contentment, because the dunya is temporary, fragile, and always changing. Now compare that to the mindset of someone who has disciplined their focus on the akhirah. They can still work hard, pursue goals, enjoy blessings, but they do not lose sight of the bigger picture. Their mind is not enslaved by distractions because they measure success differently. For them, success is not did people clap for me, but is Allah pleased with me. That simple shift changes everything. When you focus on the akhirah, the dunya falls into its proper place, a means, not an end. Psychologically, this is liberating. Many people suffer from anxiety because they are chasing what they cannot control. Other people's opinions, market fluctuations, worldly outcomes. But when your mind is anchored in the akhirah, you see beyond the temporary. You still make effort, you still plan, but your heart is not enslaved by the results. That is why the Qur'an emphasizes tawakkul, trusting Allah after you've done your part. It frees your mind from constant overthinking and comparison. Look at how the Prophet lived. He engaged with the dunya. He worked, he married, he built a community. But his heart was never attached to it. He would remind his companions, be in this world as though you are a stranger or a traveler. What does that mean? A traveler uses the road, but he doesn't build his home there. He benefits from the journey, but his focus is always on the destination. In the same way, if your mind is fixed on the akhirah, you will use the dunya wisely without being consumed by it. Distraction is not just about entertainment or materialism. It can even be in noble pursuits. A person may become so focused on their career, their family responsibilities, even their community work, that they forget the ultimate purpose. That's why Salah, fasting, and remembrance act like resets. They realign you, pulling you back to the reality that everything you do must connect to Allah. Without that reset, even good things can become distractions if they lead you away from the final destination. And we should be honest with ourselves. Distractions are not neutral. Every distraction steals from your time, your energy, your mental clarity. If you do not guard your focus, your life will pass in trivialities, and you'll look back wondering what you truly achieved. But if you discipline your mind to prioritize the akhirah, every moment becomes meaningful, even the mundane acts. Eating becomes worship if you intend to strengthen yourself for good deeds. Work becomes worship if you intend to provide halal sustenance. Family time becomes worship if you intend to nurture bonds for Allah's sake. That is what happens when the mind learns to prioritize correctly. So I ask you to reflect. Are your thoughts dominated by distractions of the dunya, or are they aligned with the purpose of the akhirah? Because at the end of the journey, all those distractions will vanish, but what you sent ahead will remain. True clarity of mind comes when you learn to say no to distractions and yes to purpose. And in that choice lies the secret of real success. At the end of the day, what are we really looking for in life? If you ask most people, they will say they want success. But when you press them further, you'll find that success means different things to different people. For some, it is wealth. For others, it is recognition, or comfort, or status. But here is the truth. All of those things can be achieved, and yet a person may still feel empty inside. How many people do we know of who seem to have it all? Yet their hearts are restless, their minds are unsettled, and their lives are filled with anxiety. That is because true success is not external, it is internal. It is not about what you own, but about who you are when you stand before Allah. The Quran describes success in simple but powerful terms. Allah says, indeed, the successful ones are those who purify themselves and remember the name of their Lord and pray. 87:14-15. Notice that success here is not linked to possessions, but to purification and remembrance. Why? Because when the mind is controlled and the heart is purified, the result is inner peace with Allah. That peace is the essence of success. Think about it. You can have wealth, but without peace, that wealth becomes a burden. You can have recognition, but without peace, you will constantly fear losing it. You can have comfort, but without peace, you will still feel restless. On the other hand, a person who may not have much of this world, but whose heart is at rest with Allah, is truly successful. Their mind is not enslaved by what people think. Their heart is not chained by the ups and downs of life. They live with a serenity that money cannot buy. From a psychological point of view, this makes perfect sense. Human beings crave certainty, security, and meaning. The dunya can never fully provide these things because it is unstable. Markets crash, health declines, relationships change, people disappoint. If your sense of success depends on what is unstable, your peace will always be fragile. But if your mind and heart are anchored in Allah, who is constant, unchanging, and everlasting, your peace will also be constant. That is why the Quran tells us, indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. That rest is the ultimate success, because it gives you stability no matter what happens outside you. Look at the lives of the prophets. They faced challenges far greater than what we can imagine: opposition, loss, betrayal, hardship. Yet they were the most content of people. Why? Because their definition of success was not tied to outcomes in the dunya, but to closeness with Allah. Yusuf, as was thrown into a well, sold as a slave, imprisoned unjustly, yet his mind and heart remained steady. Why? Because he understood that real success is being with Allah, regardless of circumstances. This is the shift we need in our own lives. Instead of asking, am I successful because people see me as successful? We should be asking, am I successful in the sight of Allah? That is the only measure that matters, and when your mind adopts that perspective, the way you live changes. You stop wasting energy on pleasing everyone. You stop being destroyed by failures or inflated by achievements. You start living with balance, humility, and gratitude, because your compass is not people's opinions, but Allah's approval. And here is the beautiful irony. When you stop chasing worldly success for its own sake, you often achieve more of it. Why? Because your mind is calm, your priorities are clear, and your actions are consistent. But even if you don't achieve it, you don't lose yourself. You remain at peace. That is true power, the kind that cannot be taken away by loss, failure, or death. So remember this: success without peace is failure in disguise, and peace with Allah is success in its purest form. The question is, are you chasing what fades, or are you securing what lasts forever?